Hey, good morning, everybody. Settle down, settle down. Hey, take that out of your
Where
mouth.
the hell did he get it?
I bet you're all wondering why we're here. And evangelical philosophy aside, we're wondering the same thing. Turns out, as literally the only media trained staff that showed up to work today, we've been tasked with your onboarding process. I'm not sure what qualifies us to teach others about the Foundation, but here we are. Dr. Zach, if you will.
Thank you, Dr. Caleb. All right. Like my colleague opened with, we're not entirely sure why they asked us to do this presentation today. Uh, our leading theory is that Dr. Miller is nowhere to be found or got the coveted cake duty. Lucky bastard. As part of a stipulation for us agreeing to do this, they let us record the whole presentation to do whatever we want to do with and sell to the highest bidder. And that was a joke. That was a joke for the man in the back. That was totally a joke. You can lower your weapon now. Uh, so what? Let's start with beginnings. You're new here. We're not new here. What is the SCP Foundation, and what exactly did you sign up for? Let's attempt to answer that real quick. So, the SCP Foundation, or Secure, Contain, and Protect Foundation, which literally no one will ever call it, is a quasi governmental agency that is committed to securing and containing hazardous anomalies in order to protect the baseline. You can see my scare quotes. Baseline reality and humanity in general. So, what does that mean? So, we find these things out in the wild that could be really anything you can imagine, and incidentally, anything you can't imagine, that sort of messes with how the world's supposed to work, how, say, math functions, physics, weight, how you remember things, and how that sort of impacts us as a species on a general level, and on an individual level, if we can help it. Dr. Carlson will help you with that when they talk about the ethics committee. And so, how do we do this? So, we function in secret because if you knew half the stuff as a general civilian that we know here just as around the water cooler, you would have a really hard time functioning. So, we function in secret. Only a few people in certain governments will know that we even exist. And that's for a lot of reasons. Sometimes we have to cooperate with high-level law enforcement, policy people to keep things away, keep people and organizations away from, let's say, sensitive situations. And that's as good as an explanation as anyone really needs to know. If you ever need to know how involved we are with the government, just know that we are. And who knows exactly how involved? Eh? How long have we been around? Quite a long time. And I would explain more about how long we've been around, but I am getting feedback from the lovely man in the suit way in the back row that I should not do that. Ooh, I should not do that. But just know that we are a venerable and mostly trusted institution by those who know about us. So going back to what exactly what it is we do, like the title we said at the start, we secure and we contain hazardous anomalies. And as you can imagine, for someone that's been around as long as we have, we've gotten quite a collection across the globe. And so to sort of help us organize and categorize and how exactly we deal with these things, some of our researchers have developed a pretty robust categorization system over the years. The first one we touch on, and I think might be the second most common, unless Dr. Caleb has any better idea than I do. One of the most common types we have is safe. And despite what the name says, safe does not mean safe. The best thing to sort of understand about these categorization types is it does not refer to how dangerous they are, it refers to how easy they are to contain. And so what safe means is that it is the easiest to contain. It doesn't require a whole lot of resources, doesn't require a whole lot of manpower. For the most part, we can kind of lock it in a room, and that's as close as it needs to be to being contained. A good example of this is one that me and Dr. Caleb covered pretty recently at the foot of the bed. And if you've ever heard of it, or if you see that in your posting orders, that is something that you will be covering, it's pretty easy. It's locked in it's a bed that's locked in a cell. As long as you don't sleep on it, it's pretty much it's not gonna hurt you. But if you do sleep on it, you're gonna be missing some foot meat that may or may not be used to make tasty foot meat fajitas. So, objectively, it can hurt you. It can hurt you a lot. But only if you use it as intended. So, safe does not mean safe, it just means easy to contain. Any questions? Looking around. Nope, cool. I want to acknowledge that the man in the suit did raise his hand, but I'm not going to call on him because I am afraid of what he has to say to me. Moving on to the second category of Euclid. Euclid is probably the most common. If safe is the second common, Euclid is probably the most common. And Euclid means one of two things. Is that we're still very much trying to figure out how it works, what exactly it's doing, but requires a good amount of resources. And so, if safe, it means that we can lock it in a room. Euclid means that we have to have like a dedicated staff, like someone had to write up actual post orders for the thing. And there's a lot of unknowns exactly of what the whole operation is. One we covered pretty recently for Euclid was the peanut. I do not remember what the peanut's name. Dr. Caleb, do you remember what the peanut's actual designation is?
I'm blanking on it.
God, we're good at our jobs. It's the statue. It's the sculpture. Euclid, and so like what it means is that we can more or less put it in a room, but don't blink. Just don't blink. And if you don't know how hard it is to not blink, just try not blinking consciously for a while. And you understand that problem pretty quick. Any questions? Euclid's pretty straightforward in that it's not straightforward, but I mean it's a simple idea that we're still trying to figure a lot of shit out. On to everyone's favorite, and still common, but no one usually signs up for the duty, is Keter. I would like to tell you where that term comes from, but I'm pretty sure that's classified, given by the nod I'm getting from the back row. Keter is the three of four classification systems we have, and refers to the most difficult to contain. This is the one you'll probably hear the most fantastical stories about, and it deals with things like 682, which is it's sort of like Wolverine and Godzilla's love child. Something that's super hard to contain. Some Keter entities and objects have entire facilities built around containing this one thing. Yeah, Keter is probably the most dangerous things we have on hand, and more than that, if they're not dangerous, they're just an absolute nightmare to deal with. One that I had personal experience with recently was the cake, and if you're wondering why, Dr. Zach, cake isn't that bad. It is if it is self-replicating ad infinitum and can drown the entire world in pastries, if not dealt with properly, and no one entirely sure where the fuck the cake comes from in the first place. God, never volunteer for cake duty. Never volunteer for cake duty. Jesus Christ. What was it saying? Oh, yeah, shit, there's another one, isn't there? This one will come up a lot less often, but when it does, it's something you're actually usually going to be kind of happy to see, and that is thaw meal. Thaw meal is a funny word that I'm pretty sure has a very historic meaning to it, but for our purposes, it means it is an anomaly that we use to contain other anomalies. And to kind of give you a better example of that, because I haven't dealt with one recently. Dr. Caleb, have you dealt with a thaw meal class recently?
It's been
a while, right?
At least 2 weeks.
Been at least 2 weeks, yeah, long enough. And so to kind of give you a better idea, I'm actually going to use something that another researcher had mentioned to us, and I found in the database, and it's held mostly true for me. And that we have this thing called the box test. And the box test is sort of a quick shorthand guide to figure out what exactly you're dealing with. And so, to roll it off, if you can put an object in a box and nothing happens, it's probably safe. If you put an object in a box and you don't know what's going to happen, it's probably Euclid. If you put the object in a box and then have to lock that box in a safe and have it surrounded by gunmen at 24 hours a day, it's probably Keter. If the object is the box, it's probably Thaumiel. And it's simple for a reason. It's mostly right. That being said, there are some entities which you should not, under any circumstance, put in a box because it will backfire spectacularly. Any questions? Dr. Caleb, do you have any questions about the box test? I know this is something that you and I have talked about a few times.
No, I think that's a great way of explaining, and it's classification is a real gray area. And there have been times that SCPs are moved up or down in classification based on new research that comes out about it.
Exactly. So never be afraid to be wrong. Honestly, be afraid of being right. And you may be wondering exactly who other than us brave researchers will be dealing with these things. Well, there's a couple of answers to that. One is MTFs, but another thing that will commonly be a group of people you interact with frequently will be the D class, to which I will hand over to my wonderful colleague, Dr. Caleb.
Thank you, Dr. Zach. Thank you for terrifying everybody. And yeah, let me first start off by saying I'm still recovering from a little bit of a cold. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, I dealt with some crazy stuff, and you think the chickenpox are bad. Imagine what we got storing in the backpack there. So my voice might come across just a little hoarse. But without further ado, let's talk about the lowest of the low. Let's talk about D class. You'll find D class all over the place. Either discarded for I shouldn't be talking about that. You might find them in their cells. They're usually wearing orange jumpsuits. They are the lowest ranking members of the Foundation. I really don't think that you could really say they have a rank, honestly. They're not paid whatsoever. They're often actually just involuntary labor that we use to interact with SCPs because they can't pay us enough to do it. Let's be honest. And they're basically guinea pigs to be used as test subjects. D-class are often found through various means. They're prisoners that are usually on death row or serving life sentences, and let's just say they volunteer to come help out at the facility. Usually somebody will go and say, hey, like, if you come work at the facility for a little bit, you'll get off scot-free. We cannot be held liable for if that statement is true or not, by the way. It also might be sent to us from foreign countries. As Dr. Zach has stated, the SCP Foundation is not necessarily a governmental entity, but we do have partnerships with governments all over the world, and we'll take political prisoners from them, or just prisoners from their prison system in general. We have a protocol, Protocol 12, where if we ever start to run out of D-Class personnel, we'll gain new D-Class personnel through any number of areas, such as political prisoners, refugees, the homeless, and even kids. And sometimes, under extreme circumstances, Foundation members will be demoted to D-Class for severe offenses. Something I'm hoping that the suited man in the back is not considering for us. Finally, you might see some D-Class running around that might look similar to another D-Class you've seen. And that probably is because it is the exact same D-Class. There are certain SCPs that you'll run across that will create clones. And, if they're just handing it to us in a basket, like, why not use it? So we'll use them as D-Class sometimes. Now, D-Class can be terminated, and they'll be terminated for disobedience, and if the D-Class are permanently altered. We need able-bodied participants to, go run from strange monsters through the halls. And if you're running from a strange monster and get your kneecaps blown off, can't run from that monster anymore, so you might be terminated. This can also be from mental strain as well. If you come into an SCP that alters your perception of reality, you probably aren't going to be cutting it as a guinea pig anymore. So you'll be terminated. Well, I shouldn't say you. None of you guys are D-Class, right?
Right?
Yeah. Nice joke, nice joke.
Yeah.
Some reports say that D-class are brought in every month and then they're terminated at the end of the month. But, others say that that is kind of a cover up for an SCP that might need a huge sacrifice. And I'm shutting up about that. So, yeah, the Foundation goes through a bunch of D-class. D-class are the heart and soul of our Foundation, and we treat them very respectfully. Any questions? All right, I think we're good to go. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's go on to the actual cool guys of the operation here. The MTFs. MTFs stands for Mobile Task Force, and they are the Black Ops of the Foundation, often tasked to deal with situations that require more than standard field ops. They're brought in from all over the Foundation and transferred between sites as needed. As Zach said earlier, the Foundation is worldwide, and sometimes the best of the best get transferred all over to deal with this kind of stuff. That's how you know that MTFs are pretty badass. These task forces vary in size depending on circumstances, from huge battalion with vehicles and equipment for hostile and hazardous SCPs to research-oriented smaller groups. Being an MTF does not necessarily mean that you are a guerrilla badass that will put SCP-682 into a headlock, but it could be specialized researchers as well, and their team that protects them as well. During times where MTFs are sent to the field, they'll often pose as emergency responders to keep suspicions low, and may call on nearby agents in the field should the situation require it. If they are going into a city and there are outposts within the city, they might need the extra hands and call those people in. Some MTFs are together for a while some are thrown together due to circumstance, which goes into MTFs are typically brought in to deal with specific SCPs. And if you deal with a certain SCP for long enough, you become an expert in that kind of thing. And even though some grizzled war veteran might not be a researcher, he still understands, like, okay, this is what I need to do to deal with this SCP. And thus, that MTF might stick together as long as that SCP remains a threat, or even they might be disbanded and then brought quickly back together if there's a containment breach. Larger groups have a commander split the group up and manage all the teams. And MTFs are deemed necessary by the Foundation Director of Task Forces and usually requires the approval of one or more of the O5 Council, which Dr. Zach will get into in a little bit. And I'm sure he is sweating bullets looking at that suited man in the back thinking about the O5 Council right about
I
now.
love our bosses. They are wonderful people.
So like I stated earlier, most MTFs are created to handle specific anomalies and created for containment that requires their expertise, although many are created as a just in case. So sometimes when there is threat of a containment breach, there will be experts of that SCP that are brought together, and then that way if there is a containment breach, they are brought in to secure, contain, and protect the SCP. And that does not necessarily mean that they are always in this MTF at all times. They could be part of multiple MTFs and then, just happen to be called upon at a certain time to deal with stuff. Which goes into most MTFs are disbanded when the threat is over. But, like I said, in rare cases where there is threat of another containment breach, the MTF will stay together because they have dealt with the anomaly before and can then fix it. So, with that, MTFs are bona fide badasses, and we love them, and we love everything that they do. Let's talk about some... what are you trying to mouth? Fantastic people. And Dr. Zach, how about you just take this one? He's going to tell you about the O5 Council.
Thanks. Hi. So the O5 Council, before we get into it, everyone in here has a security clearance of 2 or higher, right? Dr. Caleb, do you have a security clearance of 2 or higher, right? This would be a real bad time to find out.
Remember that last time? Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
You're talking about amnestics later, so even if I don't, we'll give me some good old drugs.
Say that, or we just all got impromptu promoted to D class. Uh, I'm okay.
Oh.
The agent's giving me the thumbs up the back. So the O5 Council, they run the joint. They are a group of people who are tasked with giving the Foundation direction with our immense resources, and just to make sure that we're sort of going in the right direction in terms of our operational goals. You may think that the 5 number means something. I'm sure it does. It doesn't refer to the number of members on the council, for instance. That is depending on what reality you're currently calling home, and I could not tell you how many are now in this reality for a variety of reasons. A lot of reasons why I can't tell you that number. One of which is in this room. But yeah,
And it's not me.
It's not me either. To make a long story real short, know that they run the place. They are the people who decide that what we're going to do with our trillions and trillions of dollars, our unspecified number of manpower, and what our goals are going to be. For a lot of reasons, we're going to leave it there. But I will point out that the O5 Council are not the only sort of governing body that are not the only governing body that the SCP Foundation has. And if you can think of what as the O5 Council as the brain of the SCP Foundation, we have something called the Ethics Committee, which is sort of like our internal compass in deciding a number of things. But I'm going to go ahead and quickly get off the stage before anyone starts opening fire. Caleb, take it away.
Wow, I think I saw legitimate fear in that man's eyes. Yeah, so O5 Council, very scary. I'm very glad that I was tasked with talking about things that are a little less of a minefield.
Coward!
So just remember, you were put on cake duty. I was not.
They hate me.
So the Ethics Committee is a weird subject, just kind of like the O5 Council. And as far as like, nobody really knows the intricacies of what each governing body does. We have speculation and we have Foundation records, but let's be honest, with a foundation as secretive as the SCP Foundation, like, who really actually knows? All right, let's check in with the suited man. Looks like I'm still good to go. So, the Ethics Committee, while the O5 Council decides what is safe, the Ethics Committee decides what is ethical. They have a couple guidelines and things that they may pull researchers or senior researchers for doing that is not ethical. These examples include using D-class personnel too often, breaching SCPs with the intention of injuring people, using a weapon of mass destruction when an SCP is breached in a population center, even though there is civilians in the area, spamming tests on certain SCP to make the SCP breached, sending an MTF to a certain SCP that is breached with the intention of the MTF squad getting injured, or taking an advantage as Overwatch to breach every SCP and, quote, rule the world. These are things that are generally frowned upon from the Ethics Committee. They live by the code, the Foundation is cold, not cruel. And while the Ethics Committee and the O5 Council may butt heads because they keep each other in check, the members of the Ethics Committee are actually picked by the O5 Council. And they are both enemies and allies of each other. And like I said, there's really not too much that we really know. And that could be due to any amount of things. You know, we have done a lot of research as researchers of the facility. You know, we've dug into some things in our free time, but I don't know. There's just not a lot known about these shadowy teams and organizations within the Foundation. And I think Zach is about to get into why we might have a hard time remembering that kind of thing. Zach, if you will you tell us about some drugs?
Drugs. Okay, now we're talking about the stuff that won't get us all killed. So as you can kind of imagine, when working with the Foundation, there's a couple of things, and by a couple of things, I mean pretty much everything that will involve you working with knowledge that you maybe wish you didn't know or you really shouldn't know. Um, and when we deal with these things, the Foundation has sort of stumbled across a pretty good answer, and that is amnestics. Amnestics are either a series of drugs or even entire procedures that are meant to help you move on with your life after dealing with really, really horrible things. So, and they really run the gamut, and they can be tailored to the particular situation that you come across on. And so, what I'm going to do is going to go down the three most general types of amnestics that we use on a regular basis here, and then maybe touch on a few other ones. The first one you'll probably deal with the most is the Class A's, which are a general retrograde. And what that means is that they will help wipe the memory of really recent events or situations or knowledge. And so let's say like you are having lunch with the family and then you say something you really shouldn't have, and everyone's suddenly freaking out, everyone's panicking, people are talking to each other left and right because they were exposed to horrible eldritch knowledge. uh, what we can do with there is we can administer some Class A amnestics via injection or pill. It's actually worth pointing out that our people in our research department have really knocked this one out of the park in that most of the amnestics are now able to be taken in a variety of forms: pill, food, inhalant, whatever. We can gas the room with this stuff. And what this will do is basically men in black some people for the last couple, maybe hours or so that they forget whatever security breach you introduced into their lives. Uh, we call this one the whoopsie. Class B is the regressive retrograde, and this one is sort of similar in the Class A's in that it's mainly meant for more recent developments, but kind of goes long further reach. And so, if Class A amnestics are good for like the last couple hours, you could use Class B amnestics for, say, wiping out an entire trip to Vegas that you really don't want anyone to remember for a variety of reasons, both for legal and dignity reasons. Uh, which, if you're wondering why some people don't remember the other one's birthdays, I'm really sorry, Dr. Caleb. Uh, the the other class of amnestics you'll commonly see are the Class C, which are the targeted retrogrades. And unlike the other two, this one requires an actual facility, like something approaching like a MRI clinic. Some like it requires a whole room, machines, equipment, and also drugs. And what these is for is sort of the targeting of specific memories. And so, like, let's say someone has experienced, say, a repeated incident throughout their lives, and we need to make sure they don't remember that incident. We would use the Class C approach, which is almost like a surgical procedure to basically targetedly destroy memories in someone's brain and really make sure it's precision. Uh, Past Class C's, we have a whole suite of other ones, and these ones can really run the gamut and really aren't used entirely a lot. Um, One is the Class E, which is going to be one that we use to not necessarily make someone not remember, but so much as not recognize what's going on entirely. And this shares the kind of effects with the Class Fs. But these ones aren't ones you're going to have a lot of experience with. And when they do come up, they're going to bring in someone who has a lot more experience with it. Fortunately or unfortunately, there's not a lot of researchers that have a lot of on-hand experience with these things, and you can decide for yourself of your career, so that's a good thing or a bad thing. Opposite of amnestics, we have mnestics. MN is a weird two letters to put together if you're not up to current date on your Greek pronunciation. Mnestics are used to help people remember things, so the opposite of amnestics. And this could be used for a variety of reasons. So, like, if you're dealing with the anti-memes divisions, which deal with memes or hazards that require not that sort of mess with your brain's ability to recognize and understand what they are. So that if you ever deal with SCP-55, that that uh Dr. Caleb, what was I talking about?
You were the only one I invited to my birthday,
Hey,
and you forgot.
Caleb, I don't know how to tell you this, but I certainly did not forget. And that's going to be something for you to unpack later. uh, Moving on. Does anyone have any questions about amnestics or monestics? No? Uh, so, one thing you'll kind of quickly pick up on in the Foundations is how fragile the world is and how quickly everything can turn to shit. And to go into exactly what happens if we do our jobs badly, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Caleb to talk about everyone's fun favorite lunchtime cafeteria chat, K classes.
Yeah, it was a pretty end of my world scenario when I invited one person to my birthday party, and apparently he was too busy eating other cakes. Okay, K class scenarios.
Cake class scenarios.
K class scenarios are used to describe end of the world scenario events that can occur. There's a lot of them, just like amnestics were, and a lot of them are kind of misleading or inconsistent. And look, there's a lot of researchers that work at this company, at this foundation, and some of them just use some bullshit language. And so, in effort to be for brevity, and because I don't want to sit here getting depressed about my birthday party all day, I'm just going to go over the most common ones here. Typically, the one thing that all K class scenarios have in common is that there is some sort of end of our current existence that occurs. That does not necessarily mean that it has to be the world exploding. That could be something as far as, Bigfoot becoming the prominent race on Earth. And we'll get into that. It is also important to know that a bunch of researchers have thought that this is the case. K class does not necessarily mean Keter class, as there are plenty of Euclid and safe SCPs that can cause end of the world scenarios. And the K class, nobody really knows why K class is K class.
I'm sure somebody does.
So, without further ado, here are the most important ones to know. You have XK, end of the world scenario. This is the most prominent one by far. And this applies to an apocalypse of some sort. Either a religious apocalypse, or the Earth and or the universe is destroyed. Then you have CK class restructuring scenarios, where reality is changed either by a higher power or changing of history. This could be like your common paradoxes of what if you go back in time and shoot Hitler and the entire world has changed. That would be a restructuring scenario. Then you have ZK class reality failure scenario, and that is when reality just breaks. This is usually due to psychics or an SCP that can break reality. There's not really a good way of illustrating that. Just imagine reality and then imagine not reality.
Caleb,
and that's your
if I can
scenario.
step in to give a good example of that scenario, imagine if reality is suddenly abided by dream logic, and you get a good idea.
Exactly. Then we have NK class gray goo scenario. And this is from self-replicating SCPs or machines that replace all organic material on Earth. And this one actually relates a lot towards Dr. Zach's favorite SCP, the cakes, and is actually a coined term from way before the Foundation coined it. So then we have SK class dominance shift scenario, and this is what I was talking about with Bigfoot, where another civilization replaces humanity as the dominant life form on Earth. That could be due to fast evolution or invasion from another species. Just humanity ceases to be the big dog. Then we have the EK class end of human consciousness scenario. Much like the title suggests, human consciousness goes bye-bye. It's a total loss of human consciousness. And then finally, last but not least, we have the lifted veil scenario. And that is where the Foundation / SCPs become public knowledge. It is not hard to see why that would be a problem. If the entire world knew what about us and what we did, there would be some questions going on.
Oh, yeah.
With that, like I said, there are tons more. And some researchers will just make up their own end of the world scenario just to say that they did it. But these are the ones that you'll come across the most and the most relevant ones to the SCP Foundation. So, with this information, you are somewhat qualified to not experience brutal vivisection at the hands of horrors outside of human comprehension.
Or to not be a complete burden to your fellow researchers and staff members.
We have been your hosts, Zach and Caleb. And remember, if you recognize the bodies in the water, no, you don't. Thanks, everybody.